So my name is Sham, and for those who don't know about me, I'm also a member of Bitcoin Saigon community, and my pleasure to welcome you here tonight. And I would like to thank you. So now I would like to call upon Mr. Alayo. He's also the member of Bitcoin Saigon community to having an open speech for the event today. Please welcome.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming. It's a pleasure to have you all here, as well as our panelists and speakers tonight. I wanted to basically introduce the community. For those who don't know, the community was started early in 2014. Was founded by members also of the first meetings. Then the passion driven to the possibility of opportunities that the blockchain technology can bring to society, the way we organize ourselves, how we drive business, conducted to the creation of the community, and has been over over 4 years, 5 years, bringing experts in the field such as Roger Bear and Antonopoulos, Dixon, have usually also experienced to social projects like recently with the help from Antonopoulos, deliver 100,000 units of his latest book to the Internet of Money to help provide more education to schools and entities, government, to raise more awareness about the technology. And me as a member, I have no link with the community except the interest of blockchain and all the possibilities that it could deliver. And every time that I have approached to them, they have been pretty open. They really like to collaborate and cooperate with all the community. For example, last year I wanted to have a little talk about trading because I thought that maybe it could help other members that are not like really aware of the possibility of trade at the time. So I approached them, looking in space, and with assistance from the same community that they have been for over 4 years, 5 years now. So also it's an invitation for you guys if you have ideas, if you wanna come here a space to talk about some topic related. It's really good to make it. They help you in the process, make sure that the quality delivered will be at the expectations of the meeting. So yeah, I think we should give a big applause for the cryptocurrency community Bitcoin Saigon for the efforts that they do here.
Thank you, Mr. Alayo, for the opening speech. Ladies and gentlemen, I now would like to introduce you the co-host of our event today, Binkabi project. Their founding team have flown all the way from London to be here with us today to share their knowledge and also their insight from launching Binkabi. Binkabi project is a blockchain-based platform for issuing and trading commodity. The team of Binkabi had done the extensive on-the-ground research in West Africa, also in Southeast Asia, to create their product. So now I would like to invite Mr. Ponle, CEO and founder of Binkabi project, on stage to give a short introduction about Binkabi. Please welcome.
Không hiểu thì có thể sau buổi tập này mình có thể nói chuyện tiếp tục tiếng Việt. Okay. So today I'm going to talk about what Binkabi is doing. Okay, so today we are talking about what Binkabi is about, and also the challenge and opportunities that what we are doing is representing. So we call ourselves Commodity 3.0, and I will explain to you why it's Commodity 3.0. Okay, so first of all, Commodity 1.0. So for those of you from Hanoi or look at the situation of the lychee season that just passed, what you have is is that you have many farmers who have harvested their lychee, bring their fresh lychee to the market to be sold to traders, to consumers, in this case consumers. So in this market, you have basically what we call a decentralized market where many buyers buy from many sellers. So it's peer-to-peer market. It's also analog in the sense that it's not digital. So it's basically change hands and commodities change hands for money going back to the seller. And then it's also a, what we call spot market where basically you sell a commodity at the spot. There's no ability for you to sell forward the commodities. Now, what happened with the spot market is that just like what happened with the lychee season is you can see that when actually this year is actually a very good harvest. So the commodity, the lychee price went down significantly. At one point, it went to about 3,000 dong per kilo, or about 15 cents per kilo. Now the same kilogram of lychee in London, where we are based, would be about 10 pounds. So that is basically the tragedy of farmers or commodity sellers. So when you actually harvested a lot, the commodity price actually go down. And when the price go up, that is when you don't have much to sell. And this is basically one of the problems in across the commodities world, especially when you have to deal with a spot market. Okay, so commodity 3.0. So here is a picture of a centralized commodity exchange. In this case, it's Ethiopia in East Africa. On this exchange, they actually mainly trade coffee and sesame, which is the two main commodities to be traded here. What happened here is that you don't see the commodities anymore, so it's become digitized. So it's either paper-based, based on some representation of the commodities in the warehouse, or some kind of electronic form. It is an open outline system that you see here, because people basically across the trading pit saying how much they want to buy or how much they want to sell, and then they will meet each other to exchange. And but what's important about this market is that apart from just selling on spot, which is basically the physical commodities that you have, you can also sell forward, which is one of the main important function for commodity exchange. The ability for you to be able to lock in the price of the commodities even before the harvest. So this helps farmers or commodity producers to be able to hedge the commodity price risk. So they will never get into a situation where at harvest they suddenly find out that they actually have a lot of commodities to sell, and therefore the price goes down. But what is not so great about this is centralized. So it's a highly censored system where you basically have to buy a trading seat before you can actually trade. You cannot trade directly on the exchange. You have to go through brokers or middlemen. You have to trade in trading lots, which is very high in value. So normal people like ourselves won't be able to participate directly on this market. So commodity 3.0, which is the picture we have here, is decentralized. So it's actually peer-to-peer on the blockchain. So there isn't any kind of centralized party representing the exchange. It's digital because it's actually representing the commodity that's sitting within a warehouse or future contract. And then it also have the spot and forward, so people can also hedge the commodity price risk. And so this is platform for issuing and trading commodities on the blockchain. So what we do is we turn real life commodities into what we call ERC20 tokens and have them traded on the blockchain. So the application that we have are two main applications. One is we call the button block, which is focused on cross-border commodity trading. So in this scenario, what we have is we have, for example, an exporter of rice from Vietnam selling to an importer of rice in Africa, and another exporter of cashew nuts in Africa export to cashew nuts to Vietnam. As you know, Vietnam is a major exporter of rice, but also a major importer of cashew nuts. Most of our cashew nuts will then be processed and then re-exported again. So with Butterblock, what we do is we basically allow, especially SMEs, to be able to trade directly across borders. But also, what we do is we reduce the FX conversion costs, because for every cross-border transactions, you basically have two FX conversions. One, let's say for an exporter of rice from Vietnam, what he has to do is the importer of, let's say, rice from Nigeria had to exchange his naira into to US dollars, and then send the US dollars to Vietnam. The exporter of rice from Vietnam will then have to exchange the US dollars back into Vietnamese dollar. So every time you exchange like that, then a lot of value is actually lose in the process through bank fees or bank exchange rates. So what we do is we have a system to match these two trades that go in opposite directions. Let's say in the example of rice and cashew nuts before, instead of having 4 FX conversions, we only have the difference between these two trades to be converted into US dollars and sent to the banking system. Therefore, we reduce significantly the cost of commodity trade across the border. So that is a Butterblock. Commodity exchange. We were on CNBC just 2 weeks ago announcing the partnership that we had with one of the largest African-based commodities group to create the world's first blockchain-based commodity exchange. So we, again, the process of turning commodity into a tokens and then have them traded on the exchange. So those are the 2 applications that we have in our platform. These 2 applications based on the tokenization of commodities, which is basically the overall trend of turning real-world assets into crypto. So if you for normal economic life, but also the opportunities for crypto investors also increase because they can have exposure to real-life assets. So charts. One on the left-hand side is the Bitcoin one-year price movement. You all know that it started to be quite low this time last year, but went up all the way in December, and then now gone down to about $6,000. On the right-hand side, you have the Dow Jones Commodity Index, also one-year movement. So what did you recognize about these 2 charts? Absolutely. So the crypto side is a lot more volatile than the real world side, which is the commodities. But what is even more important about these 2 charts is that the volatility are not correlated. So from a portfolio management point of view, you need to have some token that represent real world commodities that will really help you to reduce the overall risk of your portfolio. So you can balance your portfolio better with commodity-backed tokens. Why crypto are so volatile? Because again, on the left-hand side, crypto, apart from some real project that have some real utilities, is basically based on hype. The ability for you to be able to sell at higher price than the price that you bought. But on the right-hand side, it is basically if we can turn rice into a rice token, then it is something that we eat every day. A lot of us eat every day. And regardless of what happened with Bitcoin, we still have to eat tomorrow. So that's why it's a lot more less volatile. So in our system, we also have another token we call BKB token, which is, for those of you who understand the crypto space, it's basically a discount and membership token which also acts as a performance bond. So when trading parties deal with each other, how do you ensure the integrity of the trade? How do I make sure that when I sell something to somebody, that I will receive the payment? And when I buy something from someone else, that I will receive the goods in the quality and the quantity that I expected in the contract. So this also acts as a performance governance. So this is our team. Apart from myself, we have two other members here today. Sitting here is Man Ray Tam, who is our COO and co-founder.
Hi.
Very beautiful. And the bearded guy, Thomas Barker, who is our acting CEO. And we're trying to drive him to become our real full-time CTO. But so for those of you who want to approach us after the meetup, three of us are here today.
We're hiring.
Yeah, very seriously. That's it. So here's our detail. And so you can, like any blockchain project, we have a Telegram channel, and we also have a website called mikabi.io. So look forward to have a discussion today with everyone, and really try to help to sort of share our experience in terms of bringing the blockchain to the real world. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mr. Kwale, for the introduction of Inkabi project. So now we may have about 1 minute so we can set up the backdrop and the field seat for the panelists so we can start our panel today. So, ladies and gentlemen, moving right along, it's now my pleasure to introduce our panelists so we can start our panel today, the most expected session of the event. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Jonathan Brown. He's reinventing in the web with decentralized technology such as MIA or IPFS. He has extensive experience in writing Ethereum smart contract in Solidity. Please welcome him. And the second panelist I would like to welcome is Mr. Thomas Barker, CTO of Incoming Project. Moreover that, he has been involved in Ethereum community from the start, and recently he architected a significant smart contract POC for a major bank in the UK. Please welcome. And another expert from Bitcoin, I also joined our panel today is Mr. Quân Le, CEO and founder of Bitcoin. Mr. Quân has over 20-year experience in high finance, technology, and commodity. He grew up in Vietnam and was educated in Vietnam and North Sydney, London Financial Service Group in complex financial product and strategy. And in 2011, in commodity and also agriculture industry. Please welcome the one. And our last panelist is, I would like to welcome Mr. Dominic Wade. He has been involved in. So now I'm sure that you don't want to keep being waiting. I would like to invite Mr. Tomo Hing. He will be the panel moderator of the event today. Tomo Hing is the technologist and entrepreneur from the US who has experience in 10 years in Vietnam. And he has been working in the cryptocurrency industry as well since 3 years. And have been among the member of Bitcoin Saigon community. Please welcome Tomo Hing.
Hello? 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 All right. This is working. Hello? Yeah. All right. So today's topic or theme is blockchain in the real world, and I guess by real world, companies get to make real money, and not just theoretical white papers to sell ICOs and so on. We have panelists, 4 panelists representing 3 companies with more, some with more ties to Vietnam, some with not so strong in Vietnam, and ended up in similar places like Vietnam to develop agriculture projects in Africa. And based on that, we realized that there's actually a lot of issues in the commodity supply chain. So in fact, it's really about bringing in, but ultimately it's about commodities, but also helping commodity produce, realizing the
people software community. So that's we're becoming blockchain developers. So it's a Ethereum launch. So that summer I was learning Solidity, and I was really interested in the idea of can we make Reddit, but Reddit or Twitter or Instagram or YouTube, but have it running on the blockchain so that I'm working on an app called D-Web. So that will be essentially a decentralized Reddit running on top of the mixed blockchain and also using another decentralized technology called IPFS.
Okay, my name is Dominic. I'm also now involved into the Bitcoin scene since sixth year by now. So I think 2013 was that time when I started really to get into it. Thanks to the government and also the banks there. Yeah, I mean, this was like the initial drive. I was already quite interested generally anyway in this kind of like monetary systems, also in economics and this kind of stuff. My way then really to become more active in the scene was building basically like the basic ground infrastructure, and back in the day there was not much around, so I was one of the co-founders basically. But back then, you didn't know anybody in your real life who had anything new about Bitcoin. So you had to go on some online forum, Bitcoin Talk, which is still relatively popular, and find some people in your area who can actually talk about this topic. But fast forward then, since I also had some family ties here to Vietnam, made an also to move in 2014. Interesting, but in order to get there, you need someone to have a bridge into the currency world. And back in the day, there was not an exchange service providing this, so it's what we started to set out to do. Back in late 2013, early 2014, and by now still operating basically exchange service, helping people to convert income to cryptocurrency, and also involved with the local community here, which we created late 2014 with some more people who are not as engaged anymore due to family reasons or got a new job somewhere else. Helping building the basic infrastructure.
Well, I'm Thomas. I also work for Pinkabi, so I guess I'll keep this short. I will do it redundant. But yeah, me personally, I actually came to Ethereum and the whole smart contract blockchain world from conventional finance. I actually say joined numerous British clearing bank. So I'm interested to hear what they're talking about, because for me, one of the real theme of the couple of years of my career spent in blockchain has been the shift gradually having the anarchist Bitcoin world through trying to build things that make lawyers and regulators happy, and now on it because of blockchain. And which of the things are actually just really similar things.
Thank you, Thomas. So before we get too deep, I assume everyone here knows what blockchains are. Yes. So we won't explain what they are, but I do want to lay some groundwork here. And Jonathan, you might here know what blockchains are. Yes. So we won't explain what they are, but I do want to lay some groundwork here. And Jonathan, each of the companies here, what blockchain are you using? If it's other blockchain or your own one? Yeah, sure.
So we want to ultimately be able to exchange any kind of blockchain-based tokens like Bitcoin or any other kind of Ether or any other kind of cryptocurrency into the what we call the commodity-backed tokens. So it's Ethereum, but ultimately it's cross-chain.
So the way I think about it is that, well, there's various ways to measure the different properties of a blockchain. So one measure would be scalability. So for example, you have Ethereum, which the Ethereum blockchain is basically full most of the time. So that's a problem for Ethereum at the moment, but it's expected that in future Ethereum will become a more scalable technology. Then you have something like EOS, which is just launched, which is it's understood to have an order of magnitude more capacity than Ethereum. But this comes at a price. So Ethereum is quite like Bitcoin in a way, because there's very strong guarantees. So if you broadcast a transaction on Bitcoin or Ethereum, you pay your transaction fee. You don't really have to trust anyone. That blockchain is just going to do what it's supposed to do, like an automatic machine. Whereas with a blockchain like EOS, it relaxes that. So it uses a system called delegated proof of stake. So you're effectively, there's certain people who you're trusting to a degree, to permit you to do what you want to do. But on the other hand, this means that, well, for the time being, you can have much more scalability. I think in the future, you'll be able to have more scalability and still have a very robust blockchain like Ethereum or Bitcoin. But at the moment, people are making compromises because you can't have both. So I'm actually, with my project, I actually made a clone of Ethereum. So this was, this means that I've got the whole capacity of the Ethereum blockchain, but it's not running on the main Ethereum blockchain. It's a separate blockchain. Maybe one day that will be necessary, but I think if you're putting a really big project on Ethereum where you want to have many cheap transactions, it's not really viable to put those on the Ethereum main chain.
What do you think about that? Do you think that you know why would you use the Ethereum blockchain and not kind of do what Jonathan says he is doing for his reasons?
Sure. Because if to use Ethereum or Bitcoin to buy a cup of coffee, then the fees will become too expensive. But if actually you trade commodities where the average size of the transaction is $50,000, then those fees, a few dollars that you pay, or maybe $10, depending on the network, how congested it is, then it's become quite acceptable. So that's why we chose Ethereum, because that has existing ecosystems. And we turn our the commodities into ERC20 tokens because there's already an existing liquidity pool, but also the infrastructure that support the ERC20 tokens. So that's why it becomes quite a natural choice for us, at least in the beginning. But we realized also about the limit.
Yeah, I think probably for like the real world use cases, I think we have the business of transfer, like remittance to it on blockchain. Up until like late last year, we only used Bitcoin, but we also saw that is fee event basically where Bitcoin transaction at times about like $50 transaction fees, at which point you're not competitive with $2 or lower. Currencies can definitely compete in traditional ways. Migrant workers usually send money back home. But yeah, $50, I mean, if you maybe just send back like $200 billion from your factory job in the other countries, that $50 goes from a transaction fee, that's not going to work. So
did you think about using other blockchains in order to fix the fee problem?
yeah, I mean, since then we also have opened up the service to some of the other popular cryptocurrencies, like partners in Hong Kong, which do like big shares. So I mean, obviously we need to scale.
I mean, I think in many ways, actually, the choice of which chain you use it's a very important choice. Because obviously, scale cryptocurrency options and the agreed interpretation of what they need. And the really exciting thing is that you can take a smart contract and you can give it to somebody and they can run it themselves. Or you can run it between 2 or 3 people or a consortium of 100 people, whatever configuration that you want. Actually switching the consensus mechanism you use, deciding, for example, that you would like to go from using the Ethereum public network to having a private network, or to move into state channels. Hopefully, when everything starts to work a bit better, which I'm acknowledging it doesn't right now, that will just be a very, very, very simple, practical decision. We won't worry very much about which chain is being used, because if your instruction is on the chain that you don't want to right now, you can just replay it into another environment where it can also work. But basically, yeah, I mean, the Ethereum public network is hopelessly expensive, and we can get away with it because the people who are using our system right now are quite rich, and the values they're transacting are really quite large. Whereas as that changes, people change.
Okay, Dominic, do you agree with Thomas? What Thomas just said, kind of how maybe the decision on which blockchain to use is not, like you said, not interesting, but maybe we could say that it doesn't matter, or do you think that at least for your business doesn't matter more?
I mean, for us, it's really about getting the job done for our customers. So they want to transfer value fast and cheap, and we have a solution for this ready. Because yeah, Bitcoin was working quite well until late last year, but then when we saw like transaction confirmation times of several hours and transaction fees, that's a problem.
How did that affect your business?
I mean, back then, more or less, I mean, our business and also all the partners which we are working with in the other countries were suffering heavily. Because, I mean, at this point, either you are forking out all the money by yourself in order to somehow keep the transaction fees low, so you have not really a business model anymore because you're losing money in the transfers, or you just raise the fees to represent the real transaction costs, and you also don't have a business anymore because customers won't pay this. I mean, you can't just switch to any random blockchain because you still have the issue with liquidity in the markets. So we could not list any completely random altcoin there and say, okay, now just transfer us $100,000 with this altcoin over here because we don't have a way to settle this here in the market.
It also means you wouldn't use your own blockchain.
Probably not. This doesn't make much sense right now because we need to have liquidity on both ends of the market. Yeah, right now, Bitcoin is certainly still leading regarding the liquidity, but we see that for certain transfers, also some of the altcoins get some liquidity. The really large transfers still on the Bitcoin network, but for like smaller transactions, it's just a few $100. Some of the altcoins get that.
So speaking of liquidity, then question to Pinkabi, how does the liquidity maybe of Ethereum affect how your business works?
The way we think about liquidity is not so much at the Ethereum blockchain level, of course, because we in our system we don't use Ethereum as a payment medium of exchange, so we actually don't really care about the liquidity of Ether itself. Of course, we use Ethereum because of all the reasons that we set out, because of the community of developers, because of the ERC20 tokens and the kind of different the ease in which you can trade one ERC20 token for another ERC20 tokens. That is what we care about. The liquidity that that is important for us is the liquidity that you often see on exchanges. That is where you need to have many buyers and many sellers. So because exchanges are fundamentally marketplaces, and you always have chicken and egg problem. So if you don't have buyers, then no sellers would care to go to the platform. And if you don't have sellers, then no buyers will go to the platform. So, and if you have only a few buyers or few sellers, then any kind of order put up on the exchange will change the price significantly. And so the price doesn't really represent the fair value of the underlying commodities anymore. So when we think about liquidity, we think about the numerous numbers of buyer and sellers, and this is where our token will actually come in terms of creating or bootstrapping that liquidities, because our tokens actually allows people to trade for free on the platform if they hold enough Pinkabi tokens. And that basically helps them to trade more on the platform and creating that liquidity.
Okay, so on the topic of liquidity and activity on exchanges, we saw in 2017 a huge increase in volume on crypto exchanges around the world. And along with all this increased activity, we saw the word blockchain become kind of a buzzword last year. And maybe it remains a buzzword this year. But so today we're talking about blockchain in the real world. So how much of that was just hype, and what is the real value of blockchain that you see? I mean, tell us how much of blockchain's value is not just hype. Jonathan.
So the there's a few use cases of blockchain that have gone viral and are real. So obviously you have the balance transfer. So that's obviously the most popular use of blockchain. Then you have Steemit, which is a Reddit-style clone implemented on a blockchain. And then, other than that, I don't really know of any project that's really like gone viral in the real world. You know, after CryptoKitties, yeah. So you know, after nine years of blockchain technology, and we haven't really achieved a great deal in some ways.
It sounds like they're saying that it's mostly hype.
Yes.
Big Fabi, how do you feel about this?
Sure. So, so in our view, for blockchain to have a real value, then it needs to link to the real economy. So in our case, we have chosen commodities to be our subject matter. So each of the ERC20 token that we create that represent the commodities, then the issue is how do you know that there's a commodity that is backing up the tokens? So this is how you link to the real world. So let's say a ERC20 token called a rice token representing 1 ton of rice. How did you know that there's actually 1 ton of rice sitting in a warehouse somewhere that back up this token? How did you know that when you present this token to the warehouse people that they recognize it and give you the rice? You know, these are the challenges when you try to connect the blockchain world to the real world. So apart from the technical capability of blockchain, a lot of this actually have to be solved with law, with legal. It has to be solved with things like audit. How do you actually send in an auditor and check out that the commodity is actually sitting in the warehouse? But also about economic incentive or crypto economics in terms of people actually have to put money at stake if they will not make value risk, some kind of performance form that will then enable us to link the real world to the blockchain world.
Thank you. Dominic, your business, it uses blockchain as a component, but it's not really that your business is a blockchain. Your product is not a blockchain itself. So why not use blockchain more? And because really right now, your business, your product is the centralized exchange or whatever, that it's not trustless, it's not permissionless, etc. Why not go more towards that?
Yeah, I mean, there's some projects out there who are trying to do this, more decentralized exchanges. Thailand Network is certainly one of the more popular ones here in Vietnam, even if Loido is coming from here. But they also have their downsides and issues, and especially, I mean, the speed of transaction execution is usually not fast enough if you're really looking to do a proper trading platform. So these decentralized exchanges, I mean, they might work for you on a casual basis if you just want to buy, sell some tokens, and it doesn't matter if it takes a few minutes or a few hours to get settled. But for like the real traders, they don't provide the tools and liquidity which you really need. I mean, they have milliseconds basically until your trade is executed. I think that we will see like both of them still in the future. So I mean, there's definitely a place for the centralized exchanges. They will, of course, have to be more like compliant, regulated. I mean, that's just the nature there, where like decentralized exchanges can take more like this route where, let's say, they don't care because the protocol is just a protocol and runs this way. Probably we'll also have still a few like these more power exchanges, which are, I mean, just in some remote locations and also don't really. I think we have to see a bit like forward. I mean, if you're looking, for example, like at Bitcoin, so Bitcoin price has also gone quite a lot over the last year, but Bitcoin is still kind of performing the way it was supposed to do, set out in the white paper from Satoshi Nakamoto almost 10 years ago. So it's, and Bitcoin is basically back in your hands that you have control over your own money in a way, which barely any other money out there provides you. Then of course we have to see all these ICOs and so on, which got quite popular over the last year. And overall, I'm not too amazed by the quality of ideas which have come out there. I mean, also helping the organizers in the community, we got so many requests of some very obscure projects who wanted to come here and talk. I mean, where you really had, you could see that these people were just sitting down and probably scrolling the internet. Okay, what's like some random startup idea, and let's just put this on a blockchain. If it doesn't make sense, or I mean, it didn't make sense if you have any clue about how this cool stuff works. But back then, people were just throwing money randomly, and so who can put them in fault for this? But yeah, we're on the stage here because.
Yeah, I mean, so to summarize your thoughts, then. Blockchain works really well for storing and transferring value, but so far we haven't seen so many other use cases for it.
Correct, yeah, similar to what Thomas said.
Yeah, Thomas, do you have any thoughts to that about blockchain and Hypernaut?
I mean, blockchain is one of those sort of like unicorn words. It means a lot of different things to different people. And I think, with obviously the whole general crypto space, the last big buzz that we had with it, with Bitcoin reaching, soaring over $100,000 and so on. Obviously, that was hype. I mean, there were literally like, I'll be mean and pick on the IOTA coin. I mean, it went up in price during a period in which no one could actually use the network at all because one of the central servers in their decentralized network was broken. I mean, in fairness to them, they've never pretended to say anything other than a pilot system that people are very excited and valued at like $4 or $6 billion, wasn't it? So obviously there was a lot of hype. Like if you give people something that they can trade and drive up in price, they will just tend to do that. It's human nature. But what I would say is, I mean, at the moment, like the pilot scheme that I've been stamping together at Binkabi for our multi-trading, I've used, and this for us as a business that doesn't really care too much about what the Bitcoin price is really interesting, is I've used smart contracts from a half a dozen different organizations. And these are things that are actually running living things with data in them and behavior. And generally integrating it from that many different people, like integrating that with web APIs would be an absolute nightmare. Because things don't run in lockstep. They don't all share interfaces. They basically don't run on the same computer. And that aspect of it is very real. Like, I have also sworn to build an exchange, but that you take a smart contract from company A and a smart contract from company B, and they utterly disagree on how the world functions, that isn't one of them. They're just snapped together like software components. It's way easier than doing conventional integration. Because in conventional integration, you have 1,000 different spinning computers, none of whose behavior you can guarantee. When you build systems in the blockchain space, you can actually just take the whole thing and run it on your own machine, and you can completely expect it to behave the same way when you put it in production, because everything is completely deterministic, otherwise it wouldn't work. And that's not just for you, that's for everybody who wants to build out the platform. So if somebody picks up the Binkabi, say one of our rice token, and they decide that what they want to do is they want to put it into a lending platform. Now, depending on the terms of the pilot, that might be working, because we won't have whitelisted it. But there's no technical reason they can't do that. There's no technological reason someone can't just pick an alternative trading venue and just snap it in there. And they won't necessarily have to talk to me. We won't necessarily need to know who they are. It will be our users' choice that they want to take their thing, their token that we've given them, and put it into something new. And that is a really valuable thing. With the conventional systems, you would actually have to have, your user would have to sign a user agreement with us, they'd have to sign a user agreement with the exchange, the exchange you want to use. We'd then need an agreement, an API link between ourselves, to verify that the user wasn't spending or transferring to both places. We'd probably have to have a meeting, maybe 6 or 7 conference calls. And we basically, it all works really badly in practice. everyone's put silos. So that aspect is really incredibly valuable. Yeah, you probably shouldn't sell your house and buy it to coins.
So it sounds like you're saying that blockchains have value here, maybe for exchanges and stuff, because it kind of guarantees that transactions will happen in a certain way.
Yeah, it means that everyone sees one consistent view of the world. I mean, if you look at the sort of countries that are really interested in this, the official countries that are interested in this, they're all around shipping containers. Because right now, because everybody can't just use one big database that Iran, Venezuela, America, Russia all trust and maintain together. A beautiful thing.
If we do have one database that everyone trusts, then do we still need regulation?
I mean, regulations to do with stuff like what's the acceptable level of impurities in paracetamol? Are you allowed to wash chicken in chlorine or not? Which is a big debate back in Britain, where I come from, leaving the EU. It's about things like that. The regulation rules we know. But yeah, I mean, if everybody could just agree to use one single computer and one language and then the fraction of the user, and the computer never breaks, then I mean, yes, we could do that.
Because Dominic, you mentioned regulations earlier, and you've run into some problems with regulations in the past. What are your thoughts on regulations? Do we need regulations? Does your business need to be regulated?
I mean, if we need them or not, it's a different question, but as an exchange, I mean, we have to prepare that they will come. So, there's of course, I mean, certain things which we are doing already kind of like in a self-regulating way, like you do KYC, and certainly if you are not required to do so right now, because, yeah, I mean, you kind of want to avoid that all kind of dirty money is flowing through your bank accounts, which might not be only troublesome because you might get charged for like money laundering or assisting to money laundering, but also because you don't want to help people ripping off other people and then somehow washing this through your exchange. I mean, we had cases like this in the past, and we're getting better to identify like the red flags kind of when we see, okay, there's something fishy going on. Obviously, we've been some experience there over the years, but yeah, otherwise you will definitely see as an